We are Vesna, Antonia.
Hildur.
And Igor, and you're listening to More FM.
As you can hear, we have a special guest joining us today, and thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about Iceland and speculative fiction and your books. So just for the record, would you like to say a few words about yourself so our audience can know who is Hildur?
Very good pronunciation, I have to say. You say it very well. So I'm Hildur Knútsdóttir, and I'm an Icelandic writer. And I have been writing in Icelandic for a very long time. I think I've published 20 books in Icelandic. And I write mostly YA and horror. And most of what I write has some kind of speculative element to it. And my first ever English translation came out in September. It's called The Night Guest, and it's a horror novella published by For Nightfire in the US. And I have more books on the way in translation.
Yeah, and it's great. I actually read The Night Guest like last month.
Oh,
okay. It's really, really great. So very bingeable and fun, and a great horror thriller. So I wanted to ask you first to share a bit about Icelandic speculative fiction. Like, would you say that it's an active scene? Like, is it a popular genre for authors to write, or is it more underground?
So firstly, Iceland has a really, really big literature scene. I think like 1 in every 7 Icelanders will publish a book in their lifetime. So we have a lot of books coming out, but we don't have a really strong or a big speculative scene for some reason. And I think maybe it's because we take literature very seriously, and sometimes I think we take literature a bit too seriously. So there's this really big emphasis on like the realist novel kind of. And sometimes it's like also like if you're a children's author or a poet, everybody, or if you write short stories, everybody's asking like, oh, when is your novel coming out? It's like as that is like the pinnacle of of literature. That's one thing that everybody should be striving towards, I think. So I think speculative fiction is not taken as serious literature here. And we also don't do a lot of genre fiction. Like we have the like crime fiction, obviously now, but it wasn't there weren't that many crime writers. There was like one who made a really big breakthrough, and he started to do really well in other parts of Europe and started making a lot of money. And then obviously there were more authors that started writing crime fiction. So I sometimes hope, like I hope that the same thing is going to happen with speculative fiction, that we will have this wave of more speculative fiction. Yeah, because crime fiction was also kind of looked down upon when they started writing crime fiction. And I remember people were like, oh, nobody's going to like buy a murder story taking place in Iceland because Iceland is so small and you can't have like a serial killer. Nobody's going to believe it, you know, but of course a good writer can pull it off, you know. So I think, although it's not a lot of us, the scene is quite active though. And I think it's also because it's very small, so we mostly know each other and we like have beers. And like a lot of us went to Worldcon in Glasgow. There was like an Icelandic delegation. I think we were like seven people maybe or something. So I think it's an active scene, and also we just try to like lift each other up. But I think there are always more people joining, kind of. And so I'm hoping it's gonna be a strong thing, because Icelanders have been like writing, or like we have so much stuff like in our like we have so many ghost stories, we have so many, like we have trolls and we have elves, and there's so much in our folklore. So we've been telling speculative stories for you know, Iceland was settled, and also the Icelandic saga. There are premonitions and dreams and, you know, magic, and you know, so there's all this stuff there.
I mean, it's really interesting because like in Croatia, I feel like speculative fiction is not well read among the audience. I mean, there is a fan base, but it's not as big as like literary or crime or for
no genre is ever as big as crime. Not even romance novels. In Croatia, crime is the top genre.
Yeah, but we have so many writers writing it and so many like publications, magazines and anthologies constantly like opening up spaces for writers. So there's like this completely different kind of situation where we have a lot of writers but not as many maybe readers.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, maybe that's also, so I know that people that are writing speculative fiction, they have been having a hard time finding Icelandic publishers that want to publish it. And the Icelandic publishers, they say, oh, there's not a market for speculative fiction or for like fantasy or sci-fi or something, because all the nerds, they're just reading in English anyway, you know. But it's kind of like the hen and the egg, because obviously they're not reading in Icelandic if no Icelandic books are published. And it's kind of weird, like we don't have like a speculative fiction publisher here, but maybe there's probably room for that on the market. Yeah, but I mean, that's also like it's really hard to make a living publishing books in Iceland, because like we are like 380,000 people who speak Icelandic, you know, so it's really hard to, and like a bestseller is like 8,000 copies or something. That's like a runaway bestseller, so it's kind of hard to make money from it, I guess.
So no publishers at all, indie or trad, who would be like only for speculative fiction open for, so no magazines, anthologies, something like that?
No. But we have like publishers that sometimes publish speculative fiction, but they don't publish a lot of it. And I think because there are so few books that come out, and maybe if one does badly, then they're like, oh no, we're not going to try that again, you know. So yeah, but there are no like special speculative fiction publishers here, and no magazines. There was a magazine, but there was like only 1 or 2 issues, I think. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, but you managed to publish.
Yeah, I do, but I think because I started out writing speculative YA, and for some reason publishers are more willing to publish like fantasy for children and young adults. So I think I kind of got my foot in the door doing that. And here in Iceland, I'm mostly known for my YA. I'm quite successful as a YA author, and I kind of leverage that to then make my publisher also publish my horror. But I don't know if they would have published it otherwise. And also like kind of what they did with like The Night Guest when it came out in Icelandic. I mean, it's a horror novella, but they kind of disguised it as, you know, a literary fiction novel because so it came out like, and they were like, this is a novel, you know. And sometimes publishers do that because they're like, because everybody's like, the novel is like the best thing you can do, so they will also sometimes try to disguise like short story collections as a novel too. Like, oh, they're all interconnected, you know, and people, they never like put short story collection on the on the cover, you know. Yeah, so that came out as a like novel, and yeah, didn't sell really well. But now I've had more horror novellas out. I have the 4th one out now. It came out like a month ago, and they're like, everyone is selling better than the last. And then of course, The Night Guest is starting to sell a little bit better when it was published abroad, because it's also like we always joke in Iceland, like Björk, like our most famous singer, like people didn't really take her seriously until she was like famous somewhere else, you know. But I kind of snuck in the back door by writing YA. Yeah,
I think that's the perception that fantasy is for the kids.
Yeah. And they've actually published also some, like not my publisher in particular, but like in Iceland, I've seen sometimes they will publish a fantasy book as YA, but it's not YA. But I think it's kind of, they're just afraid that the market isn't there, you know.
It can be really problematic in the
and then of course world. The market isn't there if you publish like a book for adults, but you disguise it as a YA book, then the YA readers are not going to like it, and the adult readers are not going to find it, you know. So yeah.
So you mentioned that you had to published in Iceland The Night Guest as a novel because it sells better than a novella, which is, by the way, something that happens here too.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, we get translated novellas in Croatian, and they suddenly become novels. But I noticed something, so I wasn't sure if that was in original or was this something that you added on in the translation. But there were like few moments while I was reading it that I had like an explanation how, like, here in Iceland or Icelandic people this. Was that something you had to add in for the wider audience?
Yeah, so like that was basically the only thing we changed. We had to change like a little bit because like my US publisher and like the editors and the people who were reading it there, it was especially everything to do with like the how the health system works here, because it's so very different from how it works there, you know, because here you like do everything via, we have like this special secure system that we can log into, and we can communicate with our doctor, and we can like renew subscriptions. No, what do you call it? Yeah, subscription for like drug, or no, sorry, medicine, not drug. So, and because like she's so focused on her health, so there was like a long description about this, and they were like, what is this? Like, this is so weird. So we had to explain that a little bit. And then there was also like a long rant that she went into about a certain political party in Iceland that we also had to cut, because they were like, no, nobody's gonna get that. You know, yeah. So there were like kind of small things that we had to change a little bit and explain to the reader, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it really just like stood out to me. Like I was like,
okay,
this feels weird to explain to fellow Icelandians.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, interesting. But you know, it's so funny. But sometimes you can see, because we have like some authors who are really big in like Germany and France. And sometimes when they are writing books in Icelandic, you can see they're like explaining kind of things that they're probably thinking about like their like German readers or something, but they like put it in the Icelandic edition as well. Yeah, so it's funny.
So when Antonia was getting ready for the podcast interview, she found out that you were a member of the Icelandic Parliament.
Yeah. Oh.
How did that happen?
Yeah. So it basically was because I've been a climate activist for years, and I was working for an NGO on climate issues here in Iceland, and I was just like really frustrated that nothing was happening, because Icelandic politicians weren't really talking about climate change, kind of like, and if they were talking about climate change, they were talking about it in the terms that, oh, it's going to be great for us, because firstly they're saying that when like all the ice melts from the North Pole, they're gonna open, like their new shipping lanes are gonna open up. So Iceland is going to become like a hub for shipping. And also they said like, oh, because the weather is it's gonna be so hot in Europe, so we are gonna become like the new breadbasket for Europe, you know. Which I thought was like a really inappropriate way to frame climate change. It's like, oh, but it's like, we're gonna make money, you know. So I was just like really frustrated about that nobody was talking about it, and I was really struggling with like, what is, as an activist, like what is the best way to make change and like raise awareness? Like, should I write about climate change, or should I, you know, protest? And I had been doing that, and then there was this election, so I decided that I was just going to run for office, and my goal for doing so was just to like talk about climate change wherever I would go. Because it's really easy, because it's something that affects, you know, everything. If you're talking about economics, it affects economics, it affects foreign policy, you know, health, housing, travel, you know, security. So it's like, it's always easy to find like some way connected, like how an issue connects with climate change. So that was my goal for running for office, was just to make sure that somebody at least was talking about climate change in this election. And this was in 2016, I think. And then I almost got voted in. And I was actually really relieved when I wasn't voted in, because like I wanted to be a writer. I didn't want to be a politician. And I think I'm probably not a very good politician. And then after the election, when somebody had like done all the numbers, they realized, because we have kind of a complicated voting system, that if another party in the north of Iceland, like if another person there would have gotten like 7 votes, I would have ended up as a parliamentarian, which I was really thankful that I didn't. But I was first alternate, because like I had been like I almost got in. So like when the person in front of me in the list, when she had to like take a vacation or was sick or something, then I would take her seat.
Mm-hmm.
So I only ended up being like for a week in parliament. So it was an interesting experience, but I think I can safely say that politics is not for me. I mean, I'm a very political person and it's very important, but I think like being in politics and all this like nitty-gritty of like being in a party, and yeah, it was not for me, but it was interesting for sure.
So I don't know if you know this, but if you when you Google your name, the thing that gets on Wikipedia is that you're a writer and politician.
I know. Like, I don't know. Like, can I change? I don't know where they got it from. It was like 2 months of my life that I was in politics, and it kind of looks like I'm a career politician. Yeah, I don't know. Like, maybe I should call Google and yeah.
It was a like fun tidbit, I guess, because you did got for this like a very short amount of time, like a Wikipedia like note, like politics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just wanted to ask, do you have like an eco horror book that's also going to get out in English translation? Because I feel like I saw something mentioned, but I'm not sure if I just misremembered.
So do you mean like in connection with climate change?
Yeah.
No. So I've written one book that came out in Icelandic 2001 or no 2022, I think maybe, and that takes place in Iceland in the year 2096. So, and that's like, I would classify that as a sci-fi book. But it's kind of like a thriller, because we have that like this organization of people that are trying to like Anyway, yes, that's kind of like an eco thriller, I think. But I don't have one coming out in English. I do have though one book where like nature is misbehaving a lot, but it's because of a supernatural entity and not climate change. But I've kind of, because I was working on climate issues for a long time, and I was also the chair for the Icelandic Climate Fund, which was the government body that gave out like money to research educational programs on climate change. So I was spending a lot of time on climate issues kind of in work. So I tried quite hard to keep it separate. Because I was reading a lot about climate change. Like some days it's really hard, because like I'm also very worried about the future and how it's going to look like. So I think I deliberately tried to keep it out, I try to keep it out of my fiction, because my writing is kind of like a safe space to go to. But it has happened though, like reviewers here in Iceland, they will like review my books and say like, oh yes, like this is, obviously about climate change or something. So they will read it into my books. And I think it's really interesting, because I don't know if it's just because that I've been really outspoken about this, and I talked a lot about climate change on my social media, and also I've done like media interviews and lectures about climate change. So I don't know if they know that I'm like thinking a lot about this, and then they read that into the book, or if it just kind of seeps into the book without me, intending it. So I don't really know. And I think that's kind of an interesting, just like how like one area of your life can affect, other areas. And maybe it's just because I'm talking about it a lot that they will read into it. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's there, probably.
Yeah, so the way you came to our podcast was actually because you and Igor were on a panel together at WorldCon.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like?
It was a panel about translation, right?
Yeah.
Because I did like kind of a lot of panels. Yeah, it was a really fun panel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think so.
It
Yeah.
was, I mean, especially since it was on a Monday, last day of the con, and
Yeah.
it was one of those moments where, good, I get to go home and sleep now.
Yes, exactly. No, yeah, but it was really fun, and to have like, it was because like we were people from like different areas of literature, like translators and authors, and also from different languages, but we were kind of like talking about the same things, and if a person would say something, I was like, yes, yeah, so it was interesting, and also good to go because of course WorldCon is English dominated or English centric, or like how you would say it. So it was really good to meet other people doing things in other languages.
Yeah. So how did you come to get translated into English?
Well, it was a very it was a big coincidence basically. So there's this Icelandic convention called IceCon, which is a science fiction, fantasy, and horror convention. And I think so I used to always say that it is the smallest convention in the world. But then I met people from Åland, and they were like, no, ours is the smallest. So it's probably the second smallest convention in the world. And it was in 2021 because they always have like an Icelandic guest of honor, and then they have one or two international guests of honors. And the good thing about like having things in Iceland, it's usually very easy to get people to come. So we've had like big names, like Elizabeth Bear was here, Naomi Novi, John Scalzi has been here. And in 2021, I was the Icelandic guest of honor, and then the international guest of honor was Mary Robinette Cowell. And it was like in the middle of COVID, so it was like even smaller than usual because people were like afraid of like going to conventions there. But Mary Robinette came over, and because she has connections or ties with Iceland, because she's also a puppeteer, so she used to live here for like 1 or 2 years. Like 15 years ago, I think. So she was working, we had this Icelandic show called Lazy Town, and she was working as a puppeteer there. So she knows some Icelandic. And I just met her there, and I was talking about, and then the night guest was just out in Icelandic. So I was talking about that, and I did a reading from it in Icelandic. And she understood enough to be interested in it, and she asked if she could try to translate it. Or like a little bit, and I said yes, and she asked me if I had an agent, and I said no, and she said, can I introduce you to my agent? And I was like, yes.
Like
and
in the
then,
movies.
Yeah, it was just like kind of like a fluke, or such a coincidence. So she just like translated bits from the book and sent it to her agent, who liked it, and he sold it to Tor like really fast, just like in like 10 days or a week or something. So it all happened really fast. Yeah, it was like a total, I don't know even what to call it, total coincidence. And like if I hadn't met my Robinette there, like this probably would not have happened. Yeah.
It's one of those things where conventions actually function as networking events.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, if I hadn't met her there, so I love conventions. It's so fun to go and meet people, and like people really just like meet at the bars and talk together. Yeah.
And you are working on another translation?
Yes. So I don't know. I don't know. Like I don't know if I can talk. I'm just gonna talk about it. Yeah. So Tor has bought 3 more books from me, and Mary Robinette has translated 2 of them already, and I have translated the third one myself. I didn't know if I could do it or not, but so I decided to try to write a short story in English last year, and so I wrote the short story and I sent it to my agent, and I was like, I don't know if it's good enough. Like, is it okay? And he was like, no, it's good. And then he sent that to Tor, and they bought it, so it's gonna come out in on Reactor in I think the 7th of March or something. And I was like, okay, since I could do this, maybe I could try to translate the book myself, because my Ragnar is like, she's amazing, but she's also really busy. So and I write really fast, so I have like backlog of, and then I also have like a backlist, so I want to get them all out. So I decided to try to translate myself, and I like started to translate I think like 10 pages or something, and then I sent it to my agent and my editor, and they were like, no, this is good enough. But obviously I probably need to like a lot more editing than like a native English speaker would. Yeah, but I think so far so good.
Do you think you'll come to the point where you're going to start to write novels in English at the get-go?
I don't know. So it was really weird. So the book that I translated myself, and that's actually, it started out as a novella, but it's getting longer and longer. So I translated that this summer and sent it to my editor, and then she sent me notes, and like I didn't have any notes for the Night Guest because like it was just kind of published as it was in Icelandic, although like with the minor changes that we were talking about earlier. But she had like notes, and so I decided that I was going to try to rewrite it in English, and like it was really hard to like do it, and I kind of felt like my brain had mushed it, like to like take this thing that I wrote in Icelandic and then starting to rewrite it in English. So it was really hard to get going, and the first rewrite was really hard, and then I got it back now in January, and it wasn't that hard to like do the second rewrite for some reason. I don't know, maybe I just had to but it was a lot easier. So, and now the book is, I think it's like maybe like 5,000 words longer than it was in Icelandic. So I've been adding a lot of stuff. Yeah, but yeah, it wasn't that hard. But I don't know if I would, and I think it's also like interesting, like how would a novel written like in English be different than from Icelandic? Yeah.
Since now you have experience with both American publishing and your national publishing, is there something in the comparison that stood out to you, like
in the process?
You mentioned you didn't have an agent, so I'm going to guess that in Iceland there's another kind of system. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so firstly, in Iceland, there's the writers' union, and the writers' union makes a deal with the publishers. The publishers have like a company, and so the writers' representatives and the publishers' representative, they make like a contract, and everybody uses that contract. So like I get the same percentage for my books that like the big, authors that sell really well too. So everybody has the same contract. So there's really no use for an agent. And also like there's so few of us, and I don't know, like agents probably wouldn't like have a lot of money. Like, so you don't need an agent to deal with the Icelandic publishers. But there are two agents in Iceland that are with the biggest publisher, and they work on selling rights abroad, so they kind of work as foreign agents. So they're not, but you don't need an agent here in Iceland. So I just always deal with my publisher myself. And really like there's not a lot to like argue about, because like it's a standard contract, although you can always argue about like covers and titles and stuff like that. Yeah, but I think like the biggest difference was like everything takes a really, really, really long time in the US. And like I sold the Night Guest in 2021 and it came out in 2024, but I think, although like it took an extra long time because it was originally supposed to come out in January 2024, and then they postponed it. They thought it was like a better time to publish it in the fall. And also what was really surprising to me, because like Icelandic publishers, they kind of treat books like a secret until they're out and in the store. So they don't really start any marketing or publicity until the book is, in the store. I think they kind of think of it as like wasted PR or something if everybody's talking about the book and you can't buy it anywhere. But Tor started sending the Night Guest out, I think, in probably like 2022 or something. So like a year and a half before it came out. And I was really surprised at like how much they do to try to create like buzz. But I think it kind of also makes sense, like if you want to get like reviews in like the big publications, they plan ahead. But I think it's kind of like a running joke in Iceland that we never plan ahead. We always just like, do things like really fast, and we are really good at like solving problems when they come up, but we're not really good at like planning to make sure that the problems don't come up, kind of. So I think it goes to show that like everything happens really fast in Iceland. And also like we always joke, like if people are coming like maybe to visit, they're like, yeah, I'm coming in August, can we meet? And then they want to like find the time, but we're like, no, just call me when you get here, because like we don't plan that far ahead. So I was really surprised at like how planned everything was, and they had like a strategy and like target. They had like printed like arcs, like advanced reader copies, and like decided who to send it to like way before the book, And I was like, wow, you really are planners. Yeah, so I think that was kind of like the biggest surprise. Yeah, that's like how everything takes a long time there. It was a bit frustrating, to be honest, because we're used to like like right now I have to decide maybe in like March right now if I am going to publish a book in October. So I have to I have to tell my publisher, Icelandic publisher, kind of like in March, April, if I'm gonna be ready with the book or not, which is like 6 months or something. So yeah.
Which is a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, a really big difference. But then also, which is kind of frustrating in Iceland, because like almost all the books come out before Christmas. We have like the Christmas book flood. Have you heard about it?
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Jólaboka flood.
Jólaboka flood, exactly. So it's a tradition that dates back to the Second World War, because there was a shortage of almost everything except paper then. So in Iceland we import almost everything. So there was like nothing here except paper. So what they did was they just like printed a lot of books, and that Christmas book became like the Christmas present. And we've had a really strong tradition of giving books for Christmas presents here ever since. But that means that almost all the books in Iceland come out before Christmas, and we call it the Christmas book flood, or Jólabókaflóðið. And I mean, it's kind of a wonderful thing, because everybody's talking about books. And if you go like to the water cooler at work, people are like, yeah, have you read this? And oh, have you read this one? Everybody's talking about books. So that is good in a way, but it's also a really hectic time, because like the authors are like running around and trying to promote their books. So it means that like if the book that I'm writing now, that I am thinking about if it should come out before Christmas, like if I don't make it in time, I can't publish it in January. I have to wait until the next Christmas book flood. So yeah, so it's kind of like make or break, and it can be a really difficult time, like in April or like June. Then like all the writers are like trying to finish their manuscripts, and but it's also nice because like all of us are on the same schedule, so it's more like you have a colleague. So like we're all getting like having copy edits at the same time, and we're also like seeing the covers. That happens in like July, August, and everybody sees their cover, So yeah, so we're kind of on the same schedule. But it's also like hard because like all the books are coming out at the same time, and so there's also maybe just like only 2 months that people are like really talking about books. So some books just are lost, in the flood, and kind of never have a chance. So it's kind of like a blessing and a curse. And I know, like I met the publisher, Icelandic publisher, once, and she told me that like I think it was like 70% of her yearly sales of her publisher takes place between like the 21st and the 23rd of December. So it's very stressful time for publishers as well.
Yeah. But isn't it like putting too much books at the same time means it's harder to get readers?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But then again, because people are buying books as a gift, so we have these, so they're not buying so it's like, I don't know if like everybody's reading the books that they're getting for Christmas, but I think it also means because, so this is like a hardcover market, so all the books come out in hardcover, and I think like people usually, like if you're buying a book for yourself, you'd probably buy like a paperback, but you give a hardcover as a gift, So I think this probably means that like more hardcovers are sold, but I don't know. Some people have talked about, like some publishers have talked about that, trying to like also sell books in other times of the year, but then they also don't want to lose this big gift market. So it's so it's hard, or complicated maybe rather.
Yeah, sounds stressful on all levels.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so good luck with this next deadline.
Yeah, thank you.
I also feel like since we talked about translations, that we should mention the most famous Icelandic translation, I feel like, in the world, which is like the very interesting story about Dracula. So stalkers. Yeah. So I want to know, like, is this something that is more like funny to us who are not from Iceland? Like, do you have jokes about it?
But I don't know if like everybody knows the story, but it turned out that like we had this translation of Dracula, and people weren't like, they were like, yeah, fine, like Dracula was translated, and then somebody read it again or something, was like, wait a minute, no, it's not. So it's basically like Dracula fan fiction or something. So they just changed it. But like we laugh about it. Yeah, I don't know, but now I'm also thinking like, would that like, is that a part of like genre fiction not being taken seriously? Because if it was like Faulkner or Beowulf or something, then people would have probably noticed a lot earlier.
I mean, I know from what I've read about the case that the translator apparently considered the Bram Stoker original too boring and that there wasn't enough sex, so he made it a little more sexier and more exciting.
Yeah, exactly. No, we just laugh about it. But I think like the book, like has kind of like a cult following. I think it was like then also translated back to translated to English.
So you didn't read it?
No, I haven't, but I should read it. Obviously, yeah.
Okay, Igor, do you have something to ask?
Actually, I do. Considering that, was it like 15 years ago that Scandinavian crime fiction became really popular in book form, but also in TV shows. And it was at first just basically Denmark, Norway, Sweden, but then it also started. They also started featuring Finland, and there was at least one crime show that was Iceland and filmed in Iceland. So I know that for the longest time, especially I remember the 90s, which was basically Iceland was more or less Iceland was Björk. That was pretty much the only thing in movies or TV shows when people mentioned Iceland, there was some kind of a Björk thing. Do you feel that the representation of Iceland for the past, let's say, 10 years in fiction in general has moved on from just, that's that place where that weird singer chick comes from?
I don't know. I think it's also like really hard for maybe me to judge, because I think like with the internet and everything, like fandoms kind of get more fragmented, I think. So it has happened to me, for example, that there are some Icelandic musicians that are like, I know their names, but like I've heard their names, and then I meet, but like to me they're not famous, and then I meet somebody like from Czech Republic, and they're like, oh my God, I love this, like I went to like 10 concerts, or something. So I think what's happening is like we have like maybe more a niche of stuff. So and it has happened that there are like Icelandic artists that I didn't realize were quite famous, but I don't know. And but we also have this stereotype, of course, of Iceland, but I think it's hard for me to know, because like I have like on Blue Sky, I sometimes post about things that are happening in Iceland, or I post pictures of something here in Iceland, and then it's always fascinating to me like what people find weird, because sometimes it's something that I didn't realize was weird, or they don't find something weird that I think is weird. So I think it's probably hard for me to judge. But obviously we have Björk was like a trailblazer for Icelandic musicians, and there are a lot of musicians now that are working internationally, and kind of like the same for the crime fiction writers. They also were kind of trailblazers for Icelandic literature. And we have a lot of Icelandic authors who do really well abroad, mostly, I think, mostly probably in Germany and France. So I think we have different types of Iceland maybe out there.
Speaking of literature, we didn't get the chance to ask you for recommendations of speculative fiction if it's translated into English from Iceland. I mean, we're obviously recommending your books. I mean, book going on for, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there's one book that I'm going to recommend that did really well in Iceland, but probably because it's a sci-fi story, but they like never said that in the marketing, so they disguised it as a literary novel. And it's called The Mask by Frida Ísberg. That's really good. So that's out in English. And then, what else? And then a friend of mine is called Alexander Dan Vilhelmsson. He wrote a book that's called The Shadow of the Short Days. And he had a really interesting case. Like I was telling you about, sometimes we need Icelanders to have a breakthrough abroad before they're taken seriously. So this is a fantasy book. And he tried to get it published here in Iceland, but the publishers were like, "Oh, it's a great book, but there's no market for it." So, so he translated it himself, and it was published. It was picked up by Gollancz in the UK. And then, of course, the Icelandic publishers wanted it. So it's called The Shadows of the Short Days. Yeah, so I think these are my two recommendations, The Mask and The Shadows of the Short Days.
So if an Icelandic author wants to publish a science fiction book, he first needs to publish it in English so he can get a translation. Yeah,
kind of. Yeah, I think so sometimes. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. Yeah. Like he ended up publishing it himself in Icelandic in 300 copies or something. And then he sold it to the UK, to the publisher in the UK, and then he did edits on it, and so it changed a lot. And then the Icelandic publisher wanted it, so he had to translate it back to Icelandic, kind of, because it wasn't really the same book anymore. So he wrote it 3 times or something. Yeah.
I mean, this sounds like a satire, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, is there anything we didn't ask you that you thought we would ask you, or which you'd like to talk about?
No, not that No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No,
okay.
It was excellent questions, all of them.
So I'm guessing that you can't say anything more about this upcoming books with Thor, Nightfire.
No, so this is all okay. This is another thing that is kind of different from the Icelandic publishing, because here I just I talk and I'm not worried about what I can say, and but then because there's nothing in the Icelandic contract, the boilerplate contract, that says I'm not allowed to talk about stuff, and there's sometimes this secrecy, and people are I can't talk about this project, so I never know what I can say. But I think that hopefully I can say that I will have a book out. Yeah, I will have a book out next year. I think hopefully in the spring of next year. But if nothing changes, so I don't know if I can say anything more than that.
We'll be patient. Yeah. Thank you so much. Really.
Questions?
Yeah. So do you have a question? So the thing that we do on our podcast at the end, we always ask our audience a question. And when we have a guest, the guest has that honor to ask them anything you would like to maybe hear as an answer from our audience.
Interesting. Are vampires back? My question. I haven't seen Nosferatu yet, but some people are okay. Yeah, this is my question. Are vampires back?
Yeah. It feels like it.
It feels like it. Yeah.
Okay, so where can we find you or follow you?
Yeah, so I am mostly on Blue Sky right now. I'm also on Instagram, but I feel really uncomfortable with Meta and and what Zuckerberg is doing, and with the new Trump administration, and they're suppressing. And I tried in Iceland on Instagram, I tried to look for #democratic or hashtag Democrat, and nothing came up, and then I tried to look for #Republicans, and they're so I am not very comfortable on Instagram right now, and I think I might leave it soon, so it's best to find me just on Blue Sky. I post a lot of there, mostly of my dog. She's very
That's a
cute.
recommendation for
Yeah.
finding you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no TikTok for you.
No, I think I'm way too old for TikTok. Like, I mean, I go on TikTok. I like watch like dog videos, cat videos on TikTok, but like I would never. Yeah, I'm too old to make TikTok videos.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
So our audience, if you have the answer for our vampires back, you'll have to send us your answers to morinakutya@gmail.com.
Tosca, is that dog? That's so sweet. Yeah.
Or at Morinakutya, Instagram or Facebook, unfortunately. So send us your answers. And Hildur, thank you very, very much. This was very fun. Yeah, and
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I hope that, so it's my dream to visit Iceland one day. So I hope we'll get to visit Iceland and maybe visit the convention you mentioned.
Yes.
I think that would be very fun.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we're going to read the short story and wait patiently for the next translation.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.